Well, welcome to week 6 of the Culture Couch Live. So, boys, Murph, how are you, boys?
Good.
Thanks, Rosie.
Good, Rosie.
Excellent. Was has got his nice performance. Was has got his nice performance by design T-shirt on too. I love that. Very nice.
Good. Making it look good. I reckon I
think he might have done some push-ups before he come on the clip too.
Caught me. Absolutely caught me.
And congratulations to Kenny and Tommy Jonas and the boys for the win last night. It was a great victory. Really good win and a really good game. Great game. Two good sides.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were chatting before we started about the influence of the crowd, isn't it? Like, it's amazing. I don't think any of us going into this season realised, how important, not to disrespect the fans, but I don't think we realised the level that they take the game to, do we? Like, without the crowd in round one, it was appalling, and you can see the difference, boys, can't you?
Absolutely. Yeah, and as you said, I think it's sort of feedback for the players, isn't it? That cheering.
100%. I reckon like you go to a game and you talk about, especially in the Premier League, you go to a game and you might go, Liverpool plays Stoke. And you go to Stoke, and it's the hardest place to win points because the crowd's just up and about and just drives the team forward to get a draw or get a win. So, yeah, you can't underestimate the influence of crowd and feedback and the adrenaline that creates for the team, the players.
Yeah, 100%. All right, boys, let's jump in. The first question from Graham: what do you do when you have the wrong people in your leadership team? Wow, that's a bit of a hand grenade, boys, to sort of start off with.
Wow.
So, Murph, why don't I go to you first, Murph? I mean, obviously you've spent a lot of time inside football clubs, as I have, but often we relate leadership teams to footy clubs. But, obviously we do a lot of work with executive teams as well. So, Murph, maybe I'll lead off with you.
That's a really difficult question, to be honest, because often, particularly in the corporate sector, leaders are appointed based on their heading up departments, and often those people have been elevated to leadership positions because they're good at their job, not necessarily good leaders. So it's not necessarily about them being great leaders; it's about them being very talented at their job. And so then, if you put them together as a leadership team, it can be quite difficult to, get the group to all work together as a team instead of a departmental head. And then if the wrong people are in the team, it can be really disruptive to the performance of the company. So how do you manage it? Well, again, we would always come back to real talk, wouldn't we? Yeah. We would just say, you've got to set really clear behaviours, develop strong relationships, and then be really honest and be unrelenting. Like, you've got to be unrelenting as a leadership team in terms of honesty and working with each other. Because if you're not, others see it. And that goes to your point, Ruzi, you always talk about it, role models. So the leaders have to be the best role models. They have to see themselves as a team. And you've got to be unrelenting on each other in terms of holding each other to account. Don't for 1 second let it go, because if the second you let it go, everybody sees it and it drops away. And then ultimately, I guess, if people can't behave well, and then you've worked with them and been honest with them, then they perhaps just have to go. You have to move them out of the leadership team, because it will be detrimental to your company's performance or your team's performance if you leave them in there.
Yeah, and I'll touch on the footy clubs perhaps at the end, Murph, because you're right. Emma, I'll throw it to you, because Murph's made a really good point, obviously, around role modelling, and we will say act your way in, act your way out. But if we take the positive approach, those ineffective leaders in the leadership group that change based on a really clear set of behaviours can become extremely valuable members, can't they, of your leadership group?
Yeah, they often become the culture champions because they're usually respected, as Jez said, for their ability to do the job that they are leading people to do, because they're high contributors themselves, but then leading's a different thing. But they're usually quite respected because they get good results. They're quite talented. But then if they change behavior due to the really direct and honest feedback they get from their teammates and the specificity around the behavior, and then they change, everyone looks at them and goes, wow, John or Sally, whoever it might be, we really respect you for your talent and results, but now we really admire you for your behavior change. So then they become, as you say, really big role models. They're often centers of influence. So they really lift a lot of the whole rest of the organization up, because behavior changes is hard. We can generally, as was you talk about a lot, we can generally train people skillfully, but to change behavior, it's difficult. So we respect them for their results, but now we admire them for their behavior change. And to Jez's point as well, if the feedback is really honest and direct and concise, and we talk about the impact that their behavior is having on the team, people often know that their behavior is not great, but they often don't know the impact, the actual amount of impact their behavior is having on the rest of the organization. And I find in my experience, when the leader actually feels that their impact is not good, then that's that impetus for the change.
And was I'm going to ask you the question here, because you're obviously at the moment employing quite a few people at Medifarm. And so when you're doing that now, and having been a proponent of the performance by design system and real talk and behaviours, are you a lot more aware now of getting leaders in your leadership group that have really good behaviours rather than the technical skills? Obviously, if you can get both, you've kicked a massive goal. But is there more of an awareness from you at the moment, from your experience now employing people and putting people in leadership teams?
100%, and I love it. My favourite thing to hear from people who end up making it onto the Medifarm Labs team is how they relate to the strangest recruitment process they've ever been through with working with getting onto the team, because it's difficult to make the team. But generally, those who make it have the personality profile to have a huge amount of success with us. I think to iterate on your point and encapsulate what Jared said as well, first off, for you to be able to manage the situation where you have someone who's not the right person in the team, first off, you have to have a really strong culture. But also, more importantly, you have to have a leader that understands that individual performance of that person. It has to be trumped by how that person behaves and reacts within the team as well, and make sure that that's the most important factor to a leadership team's success. And a lot of times, as Jez said, individuals or companies don't know that because they're focused purely on the outcomes and not on the process and not on the culture. And that's a real gap in companies today. So first off, having a strong culture is important, but then making it difficult to get, say, into the company, but then also through the organisation, not based on outcomes, but based on how good you are as a human and how much you do all the extra, I call it the extracurricular stuff. My team's out there now, all walking around communicating and interacting and just getting along and talking about stuff rather than sitting here in front of the computer. And it's an important factor of culture building and relationships and understanding what's happening in the business.
Yeah, and just to touch on the footy analogy, as I said before, I mean, one of the great benefits in a footy club is you can actually vote on your leadership group. So you can actually get your behaviours and vote according to your behaviours. And Stewie Maxfield changed the mould really when you talk about leadership teams and captains in footy clubs. So we would always encourage, and it's a lot more difficult in the corporate world because not that Stewie wasn't technically good as a footballer, he was technically good, but the challenge always in the corporate is the technical component. We would always say, get the behaviours right, and I would say this all the time. You can always employ people to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah. But it's very, very difficult to get really good role models, really clear on behaviours, really good on building relationships. And that's why the footy model works extremely, extremely well. Boys, question 2 from Grace. I'm a young person in a new company and aspire to become a leader any advice? And that probably follows a little bit on from the first question, which is good. So I'm a young person in a new company and aspire to become a leader. Any advice? So maybe I'll go reverse. Again, you touched on your company, you touched on your interview process. What's your advice to a young person in a young company that says, yeah, look, I really want to be a leader in this organisation?
Live and breathe the culture code. Live and breathe it. Show through your actions that you can follow through on it. You know, monkey see, monkey do, lack of a better term. But ultimately, you know, you see of that person. I think Jared talked about it in previous days in the football club, but you know, the newest member on the team being able to challenge the older member of the team if they're not behaving appropriately might be one attribute that's very difficult to do, but take the responsibility to hold yourself accountable to the culture code, but also walk around and praise others for doing the things that they're doing well. You know, we talked about the footy thing before. You know, Port Adelaide had a crowd for once and they get feedback, and all of a sudden everyone's feeling good about yourselves. Won't take too long for you to be recognised within an organisation if you're the person who's challenging, rewarding, praising, but all coming back to the culture code itself. And I have good examples of this where I've hired a sort of head of sales in my organisation, but he could see the senior management team, and he said, I want to be part of that. And I said, well, you don't just come and ask for it. It's about how you act and behave over the next sort of 12 months. And there's an opportunity to be there, but there's also an opportunity to not. And then all of a sudden he followed through, and that he's one of the guys out there now walking around who's got really strong relationship with people, and everyone trusts him. So they get into really good dialogue together. So it's achievable by anyone, but it's coming back to how you act and behave within the organisation for sure.
And to Em and Murph, I'll go to Em first, but one of the great things when we do the workshops, isn't it? Probably at the end of the day, when we typically sit on the call with the CEO, and we're often asked about their staff and how, so it's great to get a bit of input, isn't it? I know you guys enjoy that component, and we get to see those behaviours and we get to see that. So tell us about maybe some of the discussions, Em, that you have had with the leaders in relation to some of their young staff.
Yeah, three things came up for me around that. Was I find that good young up-and-comers ask a lot of questions, but they ask quite specific, almost proactive questions, I like to call them, in that questions like, what do I have to, like, to your point, I think it's Adam who's done that, was it, with you guys, who's a legend. I quite like Ads, kind of character. He makes me laugh, that dude. What do I have to do to get into the leadership team? You know, really pointed, because then when you get the feedback back, you get very clear direction around that behavior, right? Because then it's clarity, and clarity, you know, is power. Second thing, I think, again, to be proactive, they request one-on-ones. So what do I have to do to get there? And can I see you 30 minutes every 2 weeks to check in on that? Is that cool? You know, they're really proactive in asking questions and then putting systems in place. That's what I've found with my clients, and even in my journey building my other company. I had quite a few young guys come in and say, I want to be here. What do I have to do? And then we put in systems, and to your point, we're very clear on those specific behaviours. And we had that once. One of my favourite memories, actually, Ruzi ended up working at Melbourne and running the football department in the Auskick component. He was a young bloke called Doc. He was a plasterer. He went through the 4 days of our program, and on the 5th day you get a yes or a no. And the boys, the leaders, came to me and said, he's not going to make it. And I said, well, have you guys told him that? And they said no. And I said, well, then go tell him what behaviour he needs to elevate with his last day to step in and get a job here with us. And he came back in, I'll never forget, he had a case of beer on his shoulder as he walked in on the Friday afternoon, and he'd lost his voice. And Doc was quite an introverted person, but they said, you have to become a character to work for us. And he just looked in the mirror that night and said, do I want to be a plasterer and have dust all over my head every day, or do I want to work with children and inspire them to move and all that sort of stuff? And he came back in, he had lost his voice because he got so into the day. And then for the next 4 years, Doc became one of our best leaders. And then when he left Canada and went to Melbourne, he got a job, and now he runs the full football department in the junior department of the Melbourne Football Club as a result of that. Thursdays, feedback, you need to become a character. And it makes me feel very proud, but it was the specificity of the feedback that helped him make that step, you know.
And Murph, just to finish off on that, I mean, there is a big, big difference, isn't there, at the football club in terms of feedback. And we touched on the millennials last week, which was great from Tom's question. But it's imperative that you ask questions. And we've had some, you and I in the last couple of weeks had some fantastic real talk sessions, haven't we? Where we've seen some really good, honest conversations. And that just happens daily and weekly at a football club, isn't it? So I think the asking questions, but more importantly, is seeking out that feedback is just important if you want to become a really good young leader.
Yeah, I think asking questions and spending time with experienced people.
Yeah.
So it's really important that you build relationships and spend time with experienced either executives or senior players. Like often young people are a little bit intimidated by the senior players or experienced, but just go and have lunch with them, have morning tea with them, just ask, watch them train, watch them go to work. I think it's really important that you take the time to learn, ask questions, but spend time with senior people. I think the other thing which I would always say is work hard.
Yeah.
One of the things that people don't talk about is hard work. But if you watch all successful people, they all work hard. They're all inquisitive and curious. And then finally, do what you say, deliver on your word. Because if you are able to always deliver on your word, people will trust you. And then once you gain that trust, then you sort of slowly move through the organisation. But it's built on, as was said, great behaviours, because you become a role model yourself. So, look in the mirror. Can I do it? Yes, I can. Okay, let's go and role model the behaviour and deliver on my word. So, yeah.
Just on that, I've watched the Amazon show, The Tests. I can't believe it's taken me so long to watch that series with the Australian cricket team. But just something came up. Is it Marnus Labuschagne, his name? The cricketer? In that series, he basically he becomes the shadow of who's our great batsman, Smith. What's his first name? Steve Smith. Watch that. Even if you don't like sport, Labuschagne just basically follows him around like a little puppy dog, mimics his movements. He's now even got a batting style where he leaves the ball similar to Steve Smith. To Jared's point, he's just done that brilliantly. And then I think last season, Labuschagne was our number one score maker. So that hanging around with people that are doing it or have been there, done that is just, it's worth its weight in gold. Unbelievable.
Yeah, fantastic, boys. Great advice. And I certainly love the mentoring piece, because as a young leader, you can't get enough information. Attach yourself to a role model. And the both questions really dovetail, aren't they? You need role models in your leadership group, because if you've got aspiring young leaders and you haven't got great leaders in your leadership group, you're not going to go too far. So they both dovetail into each other. Well done, boys. Great week. I know Woz has got to go and get his St Kilda jumper on and get his St Kilda shorts on and get ready for the final. What number you got on your jumper, Woz?
Good question. Don't know.
Old Shuey Low, or you got the old Tony Lockett jumper? Or what do you got?
Spide Everett, number 10, mate. Number 10.
Yeah,
number 10.
Was his cousin? Was his first cousin?
Good fella, Spider. I coach Spider too. So, no, good. Hopefully, good weekend of footy. We touched on the game last night. So, thanks very much, boys, for week 6 of the Culture Couch Live, and we'll catch up with you next week.
See you guys.
See you guys. Good luck, Saints.